All right, welcome back. Episode 4.
Fourth of the episodes.
Fourth of the episodes. Tom back in his home turf. I'm also in my home turf, but I never really left. And back to our regular time schedule, which means I'm drinking booze and Tom's drinking coffee.
Tom's drinking booze and coffee.
Oh, spicy.
Yeah.
Nice one.
I'm not. That would be
There is no judgment
inappropriate
on this podcast, Tom.
I really hope you would judge me if I was knocking back alcohol at 8:30 on a work day.
Yeah, true. Probably. Well, it depends on the situation, but yeah, no, fair enough. Well, how you been?
I'm good. Just got back from me Ollie Bobs.
Mhm.
That's holidays for non-British people. Went to Coachella,
Mhm.
which was good, and then did a little tour around Southern California, and then went to a wedding in LA for my partner's cousin. So that was wonderful.
Yeah.
Now back on deck. Managed to stop in New York on the way home as well to do some work stuff as well. A couple of meetings, which is good. And my best mate lives there, so that's always handy to see him as well. So shout out to Nick. Yay.
Yeah.
He's not listening.
I'm sure he's one of our many subscribers. Yeah, good.
How's your week, mate? Holding down the fort, doing the work.
Yeah, holding down the fort. And I keep him well. We are on to our third and final long weekend here in Australia. For some reason, they lumped a whole bunch together. So we had Easter and then Anzac Day, I think. And I don't even know what this one is, if I'm being honest with you, but it's another long
I think it's
weekend.
Labor Day, right? It's Labor Day, right?
It could be, yeah.
That's usually around the 1st of May.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that makes sense first. Yeah.
I think if you send a email to anyone in Southeast Queensland at the moment, you just get an automatic reply saying, I'm away until
sometime in the future when we work this out. But no, it's been good. Just keeping up with everything. But I mean, the world's been busy over this last week.
Mr. Musk just bought Twitter, which we'll get into today, I understand.
Yes, that's the topic for today, and it's an interesting one for sure. But
before we get into it, what are you drinking? You said you're drinking booze.
Yeah, I was gonna crack a wine, but then as Tom and I discussed before the show, it doesn't keep, and I didn't want to open a bottle and have to drink the whole bottle. At least
your hands are tied. Your hands are just tied.
Yeah, just can't do anything about it. So it's a Talisker, not the Storm, but it's 10 years. It's quite nice. A few cold pieces of marble in there as opposed to actual ice.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you? What you got?
I have a selection of 3 beverages today. So this will have to be an hour because I'll probably wet myself on air otherwise. Each of them are like 400 ml. So we have the coffee, sponsored by Yeti. I just got a new lid for this. My partner was in Austin for work, and the lid broke, and she went to the Yeti store. It looked amazing. I'm just glad I wasn't there because I would have walked out with 1 paycheck less. Got some breakfast in the form of shake, not sponsored by Huel. This is Not Huel or Huel.
It's surely it's Huel. Huel.
And then this is, that makes a lot more sense. I've never said it out loud until now. And then I've got Nalgene with good old-fashioned H2O with huge amounts of calcium because the water here is very hard, they say.
There you go. Yeah. Well, good. Tom and his little beverage.
But I didn't talk about my brew. Today is the El Capitan mix.
Capitan
from Honduras.
Surprisingly, not from anywhere near El Capitan.
There's an El Capitan.
Isn't that like a national park in California?
No, that's the thing that the guy climbed in Yosemite.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a rock.
Yeah,
it's a thing, right? Like,
I'm not totally the captain.
Yeah, I figured it did. Of course. Yeah, good. And how did you make this brew this morning? We're still waiting for your TikTok on how to pour the perfect brew.
Oh, So today I did the espresso, which is the cafetiere, which is those like metal spaceships that sit on top of the actual burner.
Oh, yeah.
And the water boils up through. Yeah, so I did it that way this morning. It's good, but like I haven't read up on it, so I don't know how to like other than just put the coffee in and turn it on, change the outcome. So,
Yeah, fair.
watch this space. That'll be my follow-up TikTok video.
My glasses are fogging up because I took the dog for a walk before this, and I'm still quite hot. So I'm going to take those off.
And
I know what you look like.
You live in an incredibly humid place.
Yes, I do.
So how do we normally do this? Do we both talk about what I've forgotten? Do we both?
Yeah, I think we both just yell over the top of each other about what our topic is for the week. I don't even know what yours is. We didn't discuss this before the show. So how about, with the element of surprise, and given that mine is not a link, it's just a general discussion about the absurdity of open source AI on Twitter. Kick us off, man. What's your
No.
topic?
You're kicking us off because we got to alternate. That's one thing, and I remember.
Oh, that's true.
So
true.
I will tell you about mine, but then you'll kick us off.
All right.
I'm digging into an article this week that I've actually said to you before, and I had like 3 things, and I was like, wasn't hugely excited about it, and then I was like, oh, there was this one topic within this article, and I was like, wait, this article was great. Why don't I just talk about this article in general rather than one niche topic in that article? And I get to talk about the niche topic as well. So today I'm going to be talking about a article called "The Science of Problem Solving." And it's on a blog called rs.io, and the tagline is like getting punched in the brain, which I think is great. And I really like this guy's writing. And if he's listening, his newsletter form is still broken. I sent him an email to let him know, but it's still broken. So
tisk. Well, I mean, speaking of newsletters, you wrote a very nice article about problem solving just this week. So if you haven't already, tomkwhite.com. Go and subscribe to Tom's newsletter, and the next one will end up in your inbox.
Yeah, I've been deep diving on this recently because I think it's the well, I won't steal all the thunder from the post, but I think it's the skill that I can work on every day. So problem solving. So
good stuff.
That's so that's what I'm talking about today, and we'll hit things. If you remember, was it episode 2 with hammock-driven development? We'll hit some stuff like that a little bit.
Yeah, nice.
And so that's what we're talking about. But we're talking about the Musk.
Yeah, I mean, look, just like literally everybody else in the world, probably. I figured we couldn't help but talk about the fact that Elon Musk is privatizing Twitter. I mean, the deal looks like it's going to go through. It's been accepted, so it's passed at least some of the hurdles. But I figured, I mean, we can talk about just how weird and wild that is. But the thing specifically,
kick off with a bit of background. What's happened?
Yeah. So,
who is Elon?
I'm going to get into who is Elon. Google him. Surely, if you're watching this, you know who Elon Musk is. But he thought that Twitter was, well, he describes it as the town square, which is a very weirdly outdated reference for anybody who wasn't born in the 1600s. But his thesis is that a lot of important discussions happen on Twitter. He's not claiming that everyone's on there, but it's too important to be anything but managed well, and he doesn't think it's being managed well. And he said, well, I'm rich, I'll buy it, take it public, and make this what it needs to be. And there's conversation about free speech and all that, and I don't want to get into that because it's a needlessly hairy topic for what is otherwise a fairly relaxed podcast.
Elliot's 100% against free speech. This is
yeah, I think
I've always known this.
Everyone should be immediately silenced on all platforms at all times, and that is the solution to all of the world's problems. But no, the thing I want to dive into is, one of his many promises, other than an edit button of all things, is to open source the algorithm. And I guess for those that aren't on any social media, but aren't on Twitter specifically, what he means there is like, how does the platform determine what shows up in your feed, your Twitter feed? What pops in? What order is it in? What posts come in from people that you aren't following? What bubbles to the top? Basically, and yeah.
I saw this. It looked like a bit of a throwaway statement buried in it as to like what he was going to change, and it seemed like one of those things which is like very big and meaningful. But then I thought about it, and I was like, hang on, this also sounds like something that someone who wouldn't really know what they're saying would say. Now, Elon's obviously proved his intelligence multiple times over, so I'm not calling Elon a dummy, but I was interested to understand what it meant further.
Yeah. And I think, for those listening for the first time, Tom and I are co-founders of a company that builds AI. We're in healthcare, not social media, but we know this space. And I found it a really interesting thing to try and dig into. And, a lot of people have been talking about this, but what the hell does open sourcing the algorithm even mean? And the more I dug, the more I realized that it doesn't mean anything. It's just not, there's nobody sitting at Twitter in that giant building, which is now basically empty, pulling levers to say, like, let's incite riots and pull the riot lever this week. Oh no, actually, let's pull the woke lever because it's Woke Wednesday. Like, it's tons of systems, probably built by very different teams, all mashed together in what is probably a ginormous code base that's been A/B tested to death and doesn't really mean anything to be open sourced. And I've been trying to think of good analogies about what open sourcing this even means. But before diving into any analogies, I just think even if you reveal this stuff, if you gave out all the code or any machine learning, you give out all the weights, it only tells you so much stuff. And I think for the average user, it's probably not going to mean anything. And look, maybe some justice do-gooders will dig into it and be like, hey, here's a flaw, point it out for the good of everyone. But, I think the more likely scenario is we'll see what happened with SEO happen on Twitter. And the people that will put the most time into digging into the algorithm is the people that will be working out how to get at the top of the algorithm. And it'll turn into a cesspit of needless Twitter thread spam, as if it hasn't already. But I think more than that, like, the best analogy I have so far is kind of like chess. And I'm listening to Josh Waitskin's book. He talks a lot about chess, so it's a pretty fresh analogy.
Which book?
Art of Learning. Yeah, it's quite good.
Small circles, maybe.
That's it. But yeah, it's ignore the dog.
I forgot what we were talking about. Look,
so
this is where
we're back. The dog has been brought inside. I was going to say silenced, but that sounds kind of barbaric.
Also, Elon wouldn't agree with that.
No, he wouldn't. But luckily, under Elliot's silence everyone policy of free speech, it works pretty well. You were saying that the food labeling on the back of food is a good analogy for open sourcing the algorithm.
Yeah, like I know that my salted caramel protein includes whey. What's that gum that's in everything? That type of that xanthan gum or yeah, xanthan gum that's in everything, and 19 other ingredients. And it's good to know that it's there, I guess, but I'm probably not going to do anything about it. Yeah,
and it doesn't. I don't think it helps in the way people want it to help. But I don't know. Who knows? I think there could be some useful changes in the way that like Twitter delivers content. One of the ones that I've seen circulate a lot recently, which I agree with, is that, in the early days of Twitter, you could access the Twitter API and you could get access to tweets and make your own sort of front end or your own app for Twitter, which is quite cool. And there was a lot of variety in the space. There was some interesting products, things like that. But eventually they got big and they wanted to be the only ones that controlled it. So they shut it down and, took away a lot of API access. And to their credit, the volume of content that they would have to feed out that API also grew a lot. But I think efforts in that direction, much like Jack being the Twitter founder, Jack Dorsey, is that his last name?
Oh, yeah, you're on first name basis, yeah.
I don't know. He just goes by
Yeah, Jack Dorsey.
I just forgot his last name. I don't know the
Jack.
bloke. But as he said, efforts to make it a communication protocol are likely better than trying to reinvent Twitter a million times. Make Twitter like email, where you can have lots of different players in the space, but it's the foundation of all that stuff happening. And
So
it makes sense.
It becomes the SMTP protocol or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Is that what
yeah, it could be. I mean, it's hard to make money off that most of the time, but I think that's a better direction to be going in, to be honest. There's some other interesting stuff I thought around Elon's claims to almost like verify all Twitter users as human. And, to clarify, that's not to remove the option of being anonymous on Twitter. It's just you can't be on Twitter unless you can somehow verify that you're a human, to try and stop bots and stuff and spam and things like that. Which is, interesting in its own right. There was an interesting conversation with, I think it was on the Lex Friedman podcast, where they were talking about, if you made everybody pay like a $50 deposit before they joined Twitter, and they could get it back when they left, as long as they had a good reputational standing in the community, you'd see like a ton of this bad behavior disappear, which is quite interesting, I thought.
So my question around this is like around the mechanics of open sourcing. Can you talk us through like what would the mechanics of an open sourcing project look like? Take away Twitter for a second, but like if you were going to go start Elliot's Midas, which is the competitor to Twitter, and you were doing with an open sourced algorithm from the start, like what would the mechanics look like? How would you open source a project like this, and like how would you actually control it so people don't actually have a right lever to pull?
Yeah, so I guess there's a few different levels. Let's assume that there is some modern machine learning in Twitter's algorithm. Step one would be reveal the code. If we're just talking about the sorting thing, let's just say we're scoping this down to, we've got a bunch of tweets and we need to put them in a certain order and decide if each one needs to show up in your timeline or not. Forget all the other bits of the Twitter code base. So you can give the code and you can say, all right, this is the code that if you give it any list of tweets, it'll spit out an ordered list, and it might include some of the tweets that you mentioned. More broadly, it says, for a given user at a given point in time, look at everyone they follow, look at everything that's happening globally, and then sort that into a similar list. But we'll simplify for the sake of this. So from that, you could count that as sort of the base level of open sourcing it. And what that would do is it would say, look, anyone else out there that has millions of tweet-like objects and millions of users could use this same code to train their own version of the Twitter algorithm and test it as much as they want. That kind of gives you an idea, but it doesn't tell you, it tells you the sort of base plans, but it doesn't tell you how it was instantiated at Twitter. The next level up might be open sourcing the weights. So that might be, okay, here's the algorithm. We trained it on all of our data, similar to, like GPT-3 and the DALL-E 2 models. Here's the output of that training process at this point in time. We're not going to give you any of the raw Twitter data because that's all secret, private. But here it is. And you can spin this up on your own giant cluster of servers, and you can poke and prod around with it as much as you want. You can run data through it. You can, maybe you can put your own profile through or a bunch of tweets and see what it would do and experiment.
So if you included, So if you included the idea of the API, you could essentially create, and this idea that Twitter becomes the email equivalent, you could essentially create Midas's Twitter, which is just riot mode Twitter, and weight it entirely towards riot mode Twitter, or something like that.
Maybe, and it really depends what. I think that would be one of the more interesting things to see is that, you know, in any of these ML setups, you have the raw data, so the tweets and everyone's profile. But I'm sure there is some manual intervention, there is some moderation at play. You know, there will be certain phrases or certain content or links to certain websites that will just immediately get flagged and ruled out. And that's not something that the AI has learned to do. You know, if there's some well-known, you know, source of illegal material, like if there's, you know, youbuyDrugs.com, or, you know, some disgusting pedophilia or something, they're going to put something in there to make sure that, like, if a tweet pops up with the link to that site, it just disappears.
Yeah. Or if it has the word cats in it, put it to the top.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that, yeah. And that's the question, I think, at the end of the day, is like,
how AI is the AI.
Well, that, and also like on this mission towards like free speech. I know I said we wouldn't get into this, but we'll get into it as much as it relates to AI. Is like, you don't want everything. You don't want, you know, people impersonating Tom and saying like, win a free Bitcoin by signing up to my newsletter. Like, you want to police that sort of stuff. And I can see the merit in trying to say, okay, let's be transparent about those policing efforts. But disguising that as open sourcing the algorithm seems like, I mean, I just think there's better ways to do it. You could use transparency reports and all sorts of stuff. And, you know, like every month, here are accounts we blocked for this reason, or we blocked this many accounts for this reason, or here's our policies and things like this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I also think as well that at the end of the day, Twitter's a private company, and as long as they're operating within the law, they can do whatever the hell they want. That's good on Elon for standing up for something, but they're a private company. Their user policies are their user policies.
I agree. I think, obviously, I don't know the inside of Elon's mind, but what it appears to me is that he sees Twitter as more than that. He sees it as a surrogate public utility and thinks it should be treated like a public utility rather than as a private company.
My first, I nearly asked, like, why doesn't he just give it to the government? Then I'm like, and then I realized there's no prior art in history for someone doing that, and like, you can set it up as a charity, but you can't turn it into a national park.
I mean, man, what a fascinating concept. Hey, like digital national parks, like,
because that's what the Tompkins Foundation does. They buy plots of land, rejuvenate them, reimburse the farmers that were on it, turn it into a wildlife park, and then transfer it to a national park. And then the day it transfers to a national park, that country can no longer like do anything to it without breaching UNESCO kind of stuff.
Yeah. Digital national parks. Because I mean, like, you know, projects like the archive, the Internet Archive, who like just take snapshots of the internet and things like that. What a fascinating idea. Because I mean, you know, obviously not on such a grand scale, but like there were communities and websites and stuff. Like, you remember Flash games from when we were kids?
Yeah.
Like, think about how much of that stuff probably just disappeared forever. And like, yeah, there was a lot of crap, but I don't know. It's part of history in a way. I think that preservation is quite interesting. But no, you're absolutely right in terms of Twitter. Like, there is no precedent of digital services as a public utility on this scale, especially internationally. Like, there is obviously, each government has, like, you know, what is it, MyGov and all that sort of stuff in Australia, which is questionably good. But yeah, an international public utility on the internet is I mean, look, if anyone's going to do it, it's the same dude who's like, let's go live on Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, is this the long-term play? I'm waiting for some Elon long-term play where it's like, oh yeah, and now Twitter exists on Mars solely, and it's owned by the Mars government,
Yeah.
Martian government.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating thing. I think, yeah, I don't know. As far as the AI goes, I really don't think there's an algorithm to open source. There was even there was something on Hacker News. I don't know if it was a joke or if it was an accident or anything else, but somebody who had access to the Twitter GitHub account created a repository called the algorithm and made it public. And it was just an empty folder. And it was up for like 6 hours and then it just disappeared. And there's speculation that it was a bit of a statement to be like, there's nothing to open source here.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
Makes Elon's promise easy then.
Yeah, exactly.
So as a let's just pretend you woke up tomorrow and Maxwell Plus didn't exist and the little entrepreneur bug in you didn't exist. As someone that loves this space, versed in this space, passionate about this space, all the things in this space, would you work for Twitter now? On an AI point of view?
Yeah.
Assuming there is AI to work on.
Yeah. Like, I can't tell you I'd spend 15 years there, but I mean, can you imagine I'm very compelled as somebody, I guess, who's an AI practitioner or, has training in that space to work on problems that just have like unfathomably large corpuses of data. Like YouTube, like Twitter, any of that stuff where it's just like data is not the problem.
Yeah.
Because, as you and I know in health tech, it's not the algorithm, it's not the code that is the bottlenecks in any of this. It's the data. There's just not enough data to surpass that. But if you went to Twitter and it was, how do you find the most insightful things on Twitter and show them to people? Or, any of that sort of stuff amongst everyone on Twitter, not just the people you follow, but everyone. Or, how do you track events and cluster things? And, can you work out interesting phenomenons in the world before they happen? How do you sell TV ratings data back in replace Nielsen? How do you, I don't know, there's just so much stuff you could do. And the academic in me is truly fascinated by that. But it's also like an unfathomable amount of power. Like, there's documented research about, manipulation of elections and emotions and mental health through social media. That's a lot of power to have. There's a lot of power to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, I would give it a go. It'd be fascinating.
Cool.
There's a part of it which is like, at a company that size, you're probably going to drown in bureaucracy, and I'll be like optimizing with shade of blue shows up on the tweet now button. But yeah.
Hey. Don't get ahead of yourself there, buddy. You'll be working for the person that's leading that project.
Yeah. I get to optimize what shade of blue is on the link in the bottom of the terms of service.
Yeah. All I could say is, for when you go work at Twitter, when you wake up tomorrow with amnesia and the ability to erase history, I request that I can toggle my what displays on my feed, because during the run up to the 2020 US presidential election, I started following both sides of the parties, so Democratic and Republican, because I wanted to. I took some stand being like, I refuse to be in an echo chamber, and I also kind of wanted to see like how Twitter would deal with that when you just like followed an even amount on either side. Now, like, it just thinks that I'm very much on one side of the equation, and I don't really want to be there, and I'd like to press the button that takes me to the other side without having to unfollow 70 people.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, hot tip for you, and I guess anyone else listening, is Twitter lists, man. Underappreciated feature. So you just throw people on a list. You might make it like balanced political opinion list. And then when you get sick of it, you just delete the list. And you can look at like filtered feeds just on people from those lists. And if you're using the mobile app, you can set it up so you can like swipe across the different feeds. So I moved anyone that wasn't a human being into its own list because I was sick of getting like, we just launched a new update to our website. Check it out now. So I just moved all of that into a list. And it works really well. So lists.
cool.
But I mean, it's not gonna help you now because you've.
Have you? Yeah. Have you ever done the what was it called? Clubhouse equivalent of Twitter?
Oh, Spaces. No, I haven't. I jumped in on one. One of my mates was he had a project and they were doing a thing, and I put it on in the background just to show a bit of support. But no, I haven't. I'll put it in the show notes. Actually, there's a cool tool that I came across, which is called. Oh, what is the name of the lady who wrote The Joy of Tidying Up?
Was she the one that got cancelled?
Did she?
No, I think she was in a battle.
I don't know.
Anyway, I'm texting, so I'm 60% engaged at the moment. But keep telling me about it.
Yeah, good. Anyway, who she is not particularly important, but there's an app which you log in with Twitter and it shows you like one by one all of your followers and their recent tweets, and it's like, does this person still bring you joy? And you can either keep following them, unfollow them, or put them in a list. And I did that over the Christmas break, and it was worth doing. I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that.
Yeah, good. All right.
Amazing.
I mean, that's enough, Elon.
Free speech solved. Done.
That'll help us rank. We'll put all the right keywords in the YouTube description. But
yeah, quickly say Web3.
Yeah, Web3. Yeah, Web3.
I thought we were going to get into Web3 for a minute there because I was like, oh, how would you like community source the weights on these? And I was like,
yeah,
damn it. Web3 is probably the answer if it works. But
let's leave that for another episode. Episode 721. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Cool, man. So tell me, rs.io.
My turn. Like being punched in the brain. So, great article. It's called the science of problem solving, not the problem of science solving. And I really like this author. I've forgotten his name, but it's his initials. RS is his initials. But he's like kind of a very funny writer. Like, when your tagline is getting punched in the brain, you know that you know what you're stepping into. And that's my kind of writing, where it's fun, it's playful. But he's incredibly well researched. And it's like basically from papers only, which is interesting. And the point of the article is he calls it the science of problem solving, but really he kind of jumps into the what is problem solving, why should we care about it, and then focuses on ways that he calls it cheap ways to improve your problem solving, which I like. It's so he starts off the article and he talks about Richard Feynman, the famous physicist, Dr. Feynman, Professor Feynman, probably. And there's a picture of his blackboard upon his death, and on it, like, this is, the guy didn't know that he was going to die. He died relatively suddenly, is my understanding. And on his blackboard, it says, know how to solve every problem that has ever been solved. And that's like a very, like, when you think that it was stuck on his blackboard when he perished, that's a incredible thing to think about.
Every problem that has ever been solved. Like, oh, yeah, okay. I get you. Like, so anything that's been done, you should know how to do it.
Correct. Yeah. Obviously, it's a lofty ambition. But so he was a bit of a freak problem solver. In fact, his second wife in the divorce claim, noted that he woke up thinking about calculus. He drove to work thinking about calculus, and he lay in bed at night thinking about calculus and doing calculus in his head.
I mean, man, we've all been there.
He was obsessed. And he kind of uses this story about Richard Feynman and the idea of know how to solve every problem as an introduction of a like cheap way to improve your problem solving. And as I said, he kind of just starts off justifying that like problem solving is a skill that is definitely worth improving because it's what we do every single day. And he likens it to a search problem, and I'm going to throw it to you to give us a definition of the search problem in computational methods. But he likens it to a search problem, and 321 Q Elliott's definition.
Well, I mean, no, give me more context. Search problems are broad. It's about finding things.
Yeah. So he likens problem solving to a search problem in that you're in one state and you need to move to another state, and there's a series of ways to move to that end state, which is the solution. And there's efficient ways and there's very inefficient ways to do it. And he gives a very simple example of like 5 steps that if you needed to move 5 steps, but there's like 25 different options, you can end up the direct path or you can do the very bouncy path. And he talks about the obviously finding the most efficient way. And he says it's very simple to think about it in this scenario when it's, there's only 25 possible options kind of thing, and you only need to move to another state. He then goes, well, when you consider the game of chess, and there is second chess reference this game. There's 10 to 120 possible moves. He says you need to find ways to be able to be efficient and simplify when you think about chess and how constrained it is. And obviously as well. So like when you're solving a problem, there is literally, maybe not infinite, I'm probably incorrect there. Actually, no, I'm going to call it, there's infinite possibilities of what to do and where to end up with any problem.
Yeah, effectively infinite. And I think, another analogy for the non-chess playing folks in the room is like if you've ever played Age of Empires or any of those games, like it's the fog of war. It's like you kind of know, what you got to do. You got to slaughter your opponent and all of their townspeople, but you have no idea where they are, and you can only see like 10 foot in front of you.
What was the cheat in Age of Empires?
Oh, I don't know.
To remove the fog of war.
It's been a long time since I played that one.
Yeah. Okay, so we're at the point where we believe problem solving is a search problem, and there's very efficient ways to do it and very inefficient ways. And this is where he jumps into all these different ways to be able to, cheap ways that he calls it, to boost your efficiency. And he starts off this section with a quote, which is quite nice, which is, "A change in perspective is worth 80 IQ points," by someone called Alan Kay, whoever they may be. And he talks about how reframing the problem is one of these cheap ways. So changing your frame of reference. And there's these famous experiments from the 70s on something called functional fixedness, which is you see something the way it should be. You see something for what it is rather than as what else it could be used for in a problem solving sense. An example of one of these experiments was there was a string hanging from the ceiling, and you needed to attach the string on the other side of the room, but you weren't able to pull the string with you to be able to attach it. And there was a pair of pliers. So what people would always do is they'd grab the string with the pliers and try and get extra arm width, and they weren't able to do it. But what they realized, what the actual solution was, is you were meant to tie the pliers to the string and swing it and stand on the other side of the room and be able to grab it. And so the idea was that you saw these pliers as a tool to grab and extend your reach, but in reality, the pliers' job was to act as a counterweight. And so we had functional fixedness on what the pliers did because of growing up with that. And so this is like the idea then is that as soon as you hear that idea, you're like, oh, okay, cool. That problem's really easy to solve. You know those moments in brain teasers, as soon as you see the solution, you're like, oh, that's really easy.
Yeah.
That's a change of reference. And so he talks about how to be able to just change your frame of reference consistently, because it's a really cheap way to be able to maybe jump to an insight in the problem.
Mm.
And one of the simple, cheap ways to do that is like talking about how we frame the problem. So consistently reframing the problem, thinking about it from a different way, thinking about it from the opposite way, thinking from an obtuse way is a cheap way to do that. And so rather than trying to solve the problem, you might actually be better off trying to think of new ways to represent the problem. So instead of thinking,
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of software engineering tends to be a lot of the initial work of software engineering is like take a problem statement and try and work out which one of these buckets it fits in and do exactly that. Because once you've done that, you've done 90% of the work. Because people know how to solve search problems or sorting problems or any of these other well described things. And if you can frame what you're doing as one of those or a combination of those, or you can split it into some of those, that's half the battle for sure.
Yeah, and sometimes I think as well, it's like important to keep an open mind and not just throw it into the bucket straight away of this is a search problem. And yeah. So he talks about changing a reference as a way to do it, because he's always pushing us to get towards that insight moment, that shower moment, that aha moment. And he then also after this he jumps into like, so it's all good, well and good that change the frame of reference, and you can write the problem in different ways, you can write the opposite, you can do things like that. But he's like, he said the real power comes from what he called incubating the problem. And this is where we kind of get back to the hammock-driven development, which is the idea of just like letting the problem percolate, letting it sleep, letting it sit. And he kind of gave like 3 ways to percolate the problem. The first one is sleeping on it. And I want to do a deep dive on that idea of handing over the problem to your background mind. I think that's a really cool idea that Rick Hickley had in his hammock-driven development. So sleep is one. Mind-wandering tasks, as he calls it, is another one, which is mowing the lawn, taking a shower. It's probably not scrolling the internet, but it's going for a walk, go for a run, lifting some weights, doing some exercise, something like that. So it's you're engaged, but not fully.
I mean, just on that for a second, this is something we've talked about before, but do you think that, let's say you're mowing the lawn, like when I mow the lawn, I throw on an audiobook because mowing the lawn's pretty fucking boring a lot of the time. Do you reckon you need to be just mowing the lawn? Do you think the audiobook like drowns out the potential for that because it's providing enough distraction that your brain is not like searching for other problems to solve?
Yeah, I think it would probably depend on the type of audiobook. So I had this study told, it's like I've never seen this study, so I can't say whether it was a study or not, but someone once told me that there was a study done on problem solving, and they gave, there was a control group, and then they gave another group, they gave everyone a problem, and then they gave everyone an hour to think about the problem. They weren't allowed to actively work on the problem. Like, they were, one control group was given like basically a room to sit in. And then the other was given video games to play, and the people that were playing video games solved the problem faster.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so what I take away from that is like, depending on what you're playing or watching or consuming, then that might change it. So for example, if you're trying to like read some dense history book on the Napoleonic era, you're trying to like bring in those facts, synthesize them, remember them, file them away for later, you're probably like not in a good mode for doing it. But if you're listening to Spot's Adventure or whatever you listen to on your normal audiobooks,
that's pretty much all I got on repeat, man.
Yeah.
Spot's Adventure.
Yeah, but I do actually think as well that you are better off leaving a little bit of incubation time. So for example, I do a fair bit of running, and I don't run with headphones. That's just my rule. It's really tempting because I'm like training for a marathon at the moment, so like I'm starting to run longer and longer, but like I just made it a rule that I'm like, I can deal without something in my ears for 60 minutes in a day.
Interesting. And I mean, was that just a test of perseverance, or did you do like a little bit of a n=1 A/B test to see how your running
Well,
time?
no, originally it's because I was like when I started running, I was running in a I was training with a group of people, and so like there'd be a little bit of chit chat and like
Mm.
I don't know, when you're running with people and training in a group, there's less need. Second thing is whenever headphones really friggin' annoy me when I'm running. I feel like they're always falling out and or the cord was this is
Yeah.
10 years ago, so it's before the AirPod era, but like the cord would bounce on your chest, and I can't run with keys. I always hide the keys outside. I hate running with things and bouncing and stuff. Anyway, so I basically just like hated it. Now I don't do it, even though I've got headphones that are good enough to stay in and I could run with them. I've done enough running without them that I don't need them.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. And then I've also like I've made a rule of like if I'm walking less than 15 minutes, you can just walk. You don't need to put the podcast in. Like you can survive 15 minutes without content. Like I consume enough content. So anyway, I try and give myself incubation time.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the merit in it and the asceticism of starving yourself. But I guess the thing that I always come back to is somebody did an interview with Stephen King, and he reads a lot of books, and like similarly Cal Newport reads a lot of books.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, how do you read so many books? And it's like whenever there's a dull moment, I'm reading. And like Cal does a lot of audiobooks. It's like if there's a moment, I got that on.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting idea of like where is the line between like 15 is it 15 minutes of a silent walk or a book, and how do you balance those two things?
I also wonder whether I've got it the wrong way around, and it's like 15 minutes isn't enough time, and I should be filling the dead time, or is it? Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's
worth
actually the
playing around with.
60-minute walks. But
Yeah.
well, the other one is cycling as well. I don't have headphones in on cycling from a safety point of view, so like that's a and I cycle most places, so that's a good way to get it. But anyway, I try and keep a little bit of downtime because I figure there's enough consumption going on in my life.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So letting your mind wander is a very cheap way to get some insights, and it's all around the changing the frame of reference. The next one as well, which is quite well known, is the idea of rubber ducking. And this is an apocryphal story. I don't know which company it came from, but it was a software company in Silicon Valley, and the VP of engineering or the CTO used to walk around and physically give people a rubber duck, engineers in their team, a rubber duck when they joined the team. And the idea was whenever you had a problem, talk to the rubber duck about it. Actually talk out loud to the rubber duck. Look it in the eye and talk about it. And they found that it just reduced errors. It reduced bugs. It reduced interruptions of senior engineers. And the idea was and we all know this as well, like as soon as you start talking to someone about the problem, then you just solve the problem. And you're like, actually, I don't need to be talking to you that's anymore. It was that. And it comes from, instead of thinking about it in your head, you are changing the frame of reference because you now need to verbalize that.
Yeah, 100%, man. And back in the day before we went remote, as somebody who's managing a lot of engineers, like I could not tell you the number of times somebody would come up to me and it's like, Elliot, I need help. So here's the thing, blah, 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 blah. Actually, never mind. And then they'd solved it halfway through the conversation. I think writing is another good way to do that. I've done that many times. I don't know where I got the advice from, but if you need help from somebody, just like write two things. One, write a letter to them, and then write their response and put yourself in their shoes. And most of the time, you know what they're going to say, and it helps you and gets you through that period. And I've done that a few times, not a whole lot, but I do think switching from these fuzzy pictures in our brain to the concrete nature of words does force you into really digging into what you know and what you don't know.
Yeah. I sometimes, if I am out and about, I put headphones in to pretend I'm on the phone and just start talking to myself out loud.
I've not done that, but yeah, I mean, Why not?
Fair. Ooh. um, yeah. So rubber ducking is the other cheap way. So once again, cheap way to change the range of reference. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Mhm.
And so those are the cheap ways. And he says the more expensive way to do it, but has longer term, comes back to Richard Feynman's original, which is solve every problem that ever needs solving. And the idea is deliberate practice on learning how to solve other people's problems and tucking that away in your tool belt.
Yeah.
I think this is very easy to think about from a software coding point of view. I think, especially from a numerical, when you're thinking numerical style or like data analysis of some description, it gets a little bit harder as soon as you start stepping away from that of understanding problems. Well, sorry, it gets harder in that I think you need to use methods that are less tried and tested, and they're a lot more qualitative. And using those are generally harder to do, I find.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I don't know if the divide is like software, because let's say you're getting into woodworking, like there's a pretty true path of like make a shelf, make a box, make a table, make a chair. It's all very concretely defined. But I think some
And
problems
reality is it's like make a joint, make a truss,
yeah,
a chair.
yeah,
A
yeah.
chair is 3 joints and 4
But
joints and a truss. And
I'll tell you what, man, like I really think that this is where video games are like massively underrated, because there's, as you say, there's like all this weird abstract stuff that like,
yeah,
how the hell are you going to practice this? How the hell are you going to practice managing 10 people
yeah,
in a way that's repeatable? Like, yeah, you can join a football team and like, be the head of that football team. But how many reps are you going to be able to pull with that? Maybe like one game and
yeah.
2 training sessions a week.
And
But
consistent reps. Like
yeah, but you can like, I don't play any of these shoot 'em up games, but you could jump in with like 10 random people and you set yourself a goal of like, I'm going to coordinate these 10 random people that I've never met into winning this match. And you can do that again and again and again and again in a way that's like, it's like simulations that are fun.
yeah.
It's so underrated, I think.
I also think as well, so like I come from a management consulting background, and like they're always pushing you to use a framework, which is a method, problem solving method, and they're really good. They are
Mm,
really good because they just structure your thinking in a way, and they've also, to use a framework means you've had to have thought about the problem and
mm,
thought about a potential way to solve this problem. Which, if you come back to our original point of like thinking about the problem and thinking about how to express the problem is like half of it, then that's great. Anyway, these frameworks are great, but like it was really hard to get the reps up on them because there's so
mm.
many of them. Not every case is perfect for them. Like it's always like, oh, this seems like the 80% answer. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, but they were effective. They were good. And yeah, some way to increase the reps on them that isn't in the wild, where and I think as well as like it's in training and everything, like you need to act perfectly. So like when game day comes around, you can like scale back to 80 to 90%. And that's like real life. So like,
mm.
yeah, give me the strategy game that has like where you need to like interrogate people with the 5 whys framework, or like consider an issue tree or something like that. Like, yeah, something where you can like actively pursue a number of frameworks around problem solving. I,
Yeah,
I'd
man.
sign up.
I am sure they are out there. 100%.
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
And then it kind of sums up problem solving as from a quote. And I'll just read it out. He goes, "We can think of problem solving like a walnut. There are 2 approaches to cracking a walnut. We can, with a hammer and chisel, force it open, or we could soak the walnut in water, rubbing it from time to time, but otherwise leaving it alone to soften. With the time, the shell becomes flexible and soft, and hand pressure alone is enough to open it."
Yeah, but man, this fucking dude's getting 1 walnut a week. That's just,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. There's probably a way you could do that in bulk. It reminds me
you can put more than 1 walnut in the water.
well, that's true. That's true. When we were kids, we used to holiday down to this farm in Queensland. We lived in Sydney at the time. I guess it was up at that point. And there was macadamia trees. And I have these memories of, for those who don't know, like macadamia nuts, they're basically just like round balls with the nut inside. I have memories of me and my siblings
Very hot.
sitting in the garage, each with like 1 or 2 macadamias in front of us and a hammer, and we would just try and smash these things, and you'd sort of clip the edge and then just like shoot across the room and all this sort of stuff. And we'd be at it for hours, and we'd eat maybe like 3 macadamias. Good times.
Should have used some water. Don't know whether they're
Should
water
use some
soluble
water.
like walnuts, but anyway.
Yeah, maybe it's a very specific to walnuts kind of thing.
Yeah. Alrighty.
Yeah,
And
good.
on that insightful end, well, let's call it.
Yes, it's been about an hour, especially when we edit out my dog going crazy. It's good. Episode 4 under wraps. Tucking these
Yeehaw.
away. Yeehaw. All right, everyone.
Do we finish on something? I can't remember. Do we talk about our books or reading or anything
Well,
like
yeah,
that?
I mean, you got anything you want to plug? What's good lately, man?
Yeah, I'm starting to write more about problem solving. That's
Yes.
check out my blog, tomkwhite.com. And
Be in the show
got a little
notes.
weekly thing that comes out. A couple of things that I liked across the week coming out today. So, yep. And what am I doing at the moment? Oh, I'm crushing through Brandon Sanderson's novels.
Oh, good. How are you enjoying it?
Yeah, good. I'm reading them in some weird order that I found on Reddit, which is like meant to be where the universe, like the eras align. So I've done Elantris, which was his first published book. Beautiful story.
Yeah, good book, man.
There's a really nice quote in it, which is like, I'll always come back to this book to remind myself that relationships and people development is like often as compelling or more compelling than swords and major battles. And then I've just started Warbreaker. It's a standalone.
What's the magic system in Warbreaker?
Breaths.
Yeah. I remember that one. That's good.
And colors.
Yeah, that's a good
300 pages in, so.
Yeah. Good stuff. If you haven't gotten Brandon Sanderson's books yet, go and get them. I told you I got the Kickstarter.
Yeah. When's the first one arrive?
Like next year. So I'll be getting every month next year. I'm really looking forward to it. He's a great author. Awesome, man. That's good. What do I have to plug?
Spots play day.
Yes. Whatever Tom says that I read all the time. I don't know. I haven't really been doing much, just working and doing all that good stuff. Yeah, no, nothing in particular. I also have a newsletter if you're keen on that. But other than that, people, thank you for tuning in. If you made it this far through this episode, thank you. Smash that like button, as they say on YouTube for some reason. I don't know why people say that. You gotta have the thumbnails where everyone's like, just
yeah.
I have a running theory. We'll talk about this in another episode, but that YouTube's ranking algorithm is kind of shit at face detection. And the only way it can do it is if you massively exaggerate your emotions, which is why everyone does that and ranks highly. But I don't know if that's true.
You know how everyone has the same icon of them, like where it's like them making a face, pointing something, holding something, and then there's like text on them. I always wonder, like, there was just a slight perturbation in the AI, like the ranking algorithm, and like it started ranking a couple of people high like that, and then everyone just followed.
Yeah, 100%, man. I wouldn't put it past it. Or just like putting random words in capitals in the title. I can do that this week. Just like a word, just a word that doesn't matter, because people do that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Science.
Yeah. Or Elon.
My dog's going crazy, so I better go.
All right. Good stuff. Well, everyone, until next time, ta-ta.
Bye, friends.